You think you can win? He asked, a sinister smile curling at the corner of his lips. I'll make sure your daughter's next. The threat sent a shiver down her spine. But there was no time to panic. Sarah's eyes flicked towards the stairs. Emma was up there. The danger to her daughter was immediate. But the gun was trained on her. She couldn't make a move without risking her life. The man stepped forward, slowly, with a twisted grin. He was savoring the moment. Now, I'll show you what happens when you try to fight back, he said. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Emma's voice screamed out in terror. The distraction was all Sarah needed. She lunged again, this time aiming directly for his hand, forcing the gun to go off. The bullet missed, grazing her side, but she didn't stop. She knocked the gun from his hand with a swift blow, and they both tumbled to the ground. Now, it was a fight for survival. The moment the gun flew out of the man's hand, Sarah didn't hesitate. She pounced, her body landing on top of him, pinning him to the ground. He struggled beneath her, trying to push her off, but she wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not after everything he had put her through. Her hands, slick with sweat, gripped his collar as she yanked him up. The man snarled, his eyes flashing with pure malice. You really think you can stop me, little girl? He spat, his breath hot with fury. Sarah didn't care about his words. All she could think of was Emma. She had to survive. She had to protect her daughter. In one swift motion, she shifted her weight and slammed her knee into his chest, forcing the air out of him with a gasp. His hands reached for her throat, trying to choke the life out of her. But Sarah wasn't giving up. She twisted her body, fighting against his grip, her nails scraping against his skin as she attempted to break free. Her heart was racing, her body was exhausted from the battle, but she knew she couldn't stop. If she stopped, Emma would be at risk. Emma would never be safe if this monster was still alive. The man's hands closed tighter around her throat, and the world began to blur around her. Her breath came in shallow gasps as the pressure mounted. She felt herself growing weaker, her vision beginning to darken. But then, a spark of hope ignited in her mind. She wasn't going to die here. She wasn't going to let him take everything from her. She struggled, her fingers scraping against his hand, desperate to pry it away. Her vision was starting to tunnel, but she couldn't give up. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Emma's voice, faint and fearful, screamed again. It wasn't just a scream of terror, it was a cry for help. That cry, Emma's voice, was the fuel Sarah needed to summon the last of her strength. With a guttural scream, she managed to twist out of the man's grasp, her hands flying to his face as she pushed herself up, gasping for air. The desperation in her chest fueled her every movement, and with one final surge, she slammed her palm into his nose, hearing the sickening crack of bone breaking under the force of the blow. The man recoiled, his eyes wide in shock as blood poured from his nose. Sarah wasted no time. She scrambled back to her feet, dizzy from the lack of oxygen but determined to keep fighting. She kicked the man hard in the side, sending him crashing to the floor. His body lay still for a moment, and for a fleeting second, Sarah thought she had won. But then, a low growl rumbled from his chest, and he slowly, painfully, began to rise. He wasn't giving up that easily. She couldn't wait any longer. Emma's scream rang out again, louder this time, and Sarah's blood ran cold. She had to end this. Without thinking, she grabbed the closest object within reach, a lamp, and swung it down on the man's head with all her remaining strength. The lamp shattered, the heavy base crashing into his skull with a sickening thud. He fell back, unconscious this time. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, panting heavily, her heart racing in her chest. She could hear the ringing in her ears, but she couldn't stop. She had to go to Emma. She had to make sure her daughter was safe. Sarah stumbled toward the stairs, her legs weak, but she pushed through the exhaustion. She could hear Emma crying, calling for her, the desperation in her voice tearing at Sarah's heart. Every second felt like an eternity as she climbed the stairs two at a time. "Mom!" Emma's voice cracked as she called out again. "Please! Where are you?" Sarah reached the top of the stairs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She turned the corner and found Emma standing at the top of the hall, her face pale with fear. Her eyes were wide, but the moment she saw her mother, her expression softened with relief. "Mom, you're okay," Emma cried, running into her arms. Sarah held her tightly, her arms shaking. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe now." She could feel Emma trembling in her embrace, her tiny body shaking with fear. But Sarah wasn't going to let go. Not until she was certain they were both safe. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, the sound of the storm outside the only noise filling the silence of the house. The danger wasn't over yet, but for now, they had each other. The battle wasn't won, but Sarah knew she couldn't stop now. There was still one more fight to face, the final confrontation. She couldn't afford to falter. Not when Emma was counting on her. The house was eerily quiet as Sarah held Emma close, her breathing slow but steady. For a moment, it felt like they were safe, just a mother and daughter, embracing the peace of being together. But deep down, Sarah knew this wouldn't last long. The man, though incapacitated for now, would wake up soon. And when he did, he'd be furious. She kissed the top of Emma's head, feeling the warmth of her little body as they stood there in the dim hallway. The storm outside continued to rage, the wind howling like some wild animal trying to tear the house apart. But inside, it was just them, and the silence that spoke volumes. "We need to move," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky but determined. She pulled away slightly, her eyes scanning the hallway, looking for anything that could be used to defend them. The furniture in the living room, the kitchen knives, they were all within reach. But her mind kept drifting back to the man downstairs. He would come for them again. Emma nodded, her face pale but resolute. She trusted her mother, and that trust gave Sarah the strength she needed to keep going. They had made it this far. They would survive. Slowly, Sarah guided Emma toward the kitchen, every step heavy with the knowledge that the next few moments could decide their fate. The kitchen was just as she had left it, empty, save for the scattered items from the earlier chaos. The knives were within reach. But before she could grab one, a low sound interrupted her thoughts, a groan, followed by a loud thud. The man was awake. Her heart skipped a beat. Emma squeezed Sarah's hand, sensing the danger before Sarah could even speak. "Mom," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. The door was the only way out, but it was too far to run to without being seen. She had no choice but to confront him, to end this once and for all. If she didn't, he would keep coming. And Emma wouldn't be safe. "Stay close," Sarah ordered, her voice firm. "We're going to face him. But you stay behind me, no matter what." Emma nodded, gripping her mother's shirt tightly. They crept toward the stairs, making no noise as they ascended slowly. The man was still downstairs, stumbling in the darkness, and Sarah knew he wouldn't be able to get up here for a few moments. This was their chance. As they reached the top of the stairs, Sarah paused, her senses on high alert. Her eyes darted around the hallway, checking for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. The only sound was the soft thrum of her heartbeat in her ears. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from below. The man was coming up. Sarah's hand tightened around Emma's as she backed into the closest room, the one with the window that overlooked the backyard. She glanced around the room quickly. There were no weapons in sight, just the bed, a dresser, and a few scattered books. But the window was open, and the backyard was the one place where they could run. It wasn't far. If they could get out there, they could make it to the neighbor's house. They would be safe. But before they could make their move, the door to the room burst open, and there he was. The man was standing in the doorway, his eyes wild with fury. His clothes were torn, his face bruised and bloodied from their earlier struggle. He was a mess, but he was still dangerous. And he had a weapon in his hand. Something Sarah hadn't seen before, a metal pipe, slick with blood. He was ready to finish what he had started. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, he sneered, his voice a low growl. Sarah didn't hesitate. She shoved Emma behind her, putting herself between her daughter and the man. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. This was it. It was do or die. They had to survive. "You don't scare me," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the terror rising inside her. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for anything she could use to defend herself. Her fingers brushed the edge of the dresser, and she quickly grabbed a heavy lamp that had been knocked to the floor earlier. "Stay away from us," Sarah shouted, brandishing the lamp like a weapon. The man didn't flinch. Instead, he lunged at her, swinging the pipe in a vicious arc. Sarah dodged, but he was too quick. The pipe grazed her arm, sending a shock of pain through her body. But she didn't back down. She swung the lamp at him with all her might, connecting with his shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back, but he wasn't done. He charged again, but this time, Sarah was ready. She sidestepped him, kicking his legs out from under him. The man fell to the floor with a crash, his pipe clattering away. Before he could get back up, Sarah grabbed the lamp again, raising it over her head. Her body was shaking, her mind racing, but there was only one thought in her head now: she had to end this. She couldn't let him hurt Emma. With a scream of fury, Sarah brought the lamp down with all her strength, hitting him in the head. The man went limp, collapsing on the floor in a heap. Sarah stood there for a moment, panting, staring at the lifeless body on the ground. It was over. They had survived. Underscore 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 underscore. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes locked on the man's still body, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. It felt like everything had slowed down, as if the world had paused for a brief moment in time. Emma's small voice broke through the tension. "Mom, is he gone?" Sarah turned to her daughter, her heart breaking at the fear in Emma's eyes. She rushed to Emma's side, pulling her into a tight embrace. "It's over, baby. He can't hurt us anymore," Sarah whispered, her voice soothing but shaky. She kissed Emma's forehead, feeling the warmth of her little girl against her. The terror of the last few hours still gripped her, but she knew they were safe now. The wind outside continued to howl, but inside, everything felt quieter. The weight of the danger had lifted, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to relax. She pulled Emma away from her, looking into her eyes. "We need to get out of here. We need to go to the neighbors and call for help. We're not staying here another second." Emma nodded, her small hand gripping Sarah's tightly. Together, they walked carefully past the body, the horrific scene now a part of their past. As they reached the door, Sarah glanced back at the man one last time. She had no idea who he was or why he had targeted them, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had protected Emma. She had kept her safe. They stepped outside into the cold, the snow still falling heavily around them. The world felt different now, like a new beginning. Sarah didn't know what the future would hold, but as she looked down at Emma, she knew they would face it together. No matter what. Months passed, and the memory of that terrifying Christmas Eve began to fade, though it would never truly disappear. Sarah and Emma had rebuilt their lives, finding solace in the small moments, quiet evenings at home, mornings filled with laughter, and the comforting routine of their everyday life. They had moved to a new town, far from the house where the nightmare unfolded. It wasn't just a fresh start, it was their chance to heal. Emma had made new friends, and Sarah had found a job that allowed her to work from home, offering both the flexibility and the peace of mind she needed. One snowy evening, as they sat together by the fireplace, Emma looked up from her book, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mom, do you think he's still out there?" Sarah paused, her gaze steady as she met Emma's eyes. "No, sweetheart. He's gone. We're safe now. And we always will be." Emma smiled and snuggled closer, resting her head on Sarah's shoulder. The past was behind them, and the future, though uncertain, was something they could face together. After everything, they had made it through. Christmas was no longer a time of fear, it had become a reminder of their strength, their survival, and their unbreakable bond. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey. If you enjoyed the suspense, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an exciting story. And be sure to check out the videos appearing on your screen for more heart-pounding tales.